All right, so, like I told you, we're going to be making another shorts, basically the same pattern, using Ms. McCall 6930. And so, not going to go back through everything that we did. I made some tweaks to the formulas, so I will go over the new formulas or the tweaks to those. But not as in depth as I did in the previous video, because it's in the previous video, so you can go look at that if you want a more detail. But we're going to go through this pretty quickly, just so we can get back in the mojo of sewing. Okay, so first things first, remember, is to grab your original pattern, and if like mine, it looked like that, without the side pocket. You want to add the side pocket, the side yoke and pocket to the pattern, right? And then you want to use this as your master pattern. And what you're going to do is just trace, copy this pattern into new copy paper, okay? And then you want to also copy any, like on my master, I put guidelines on mine. So my guidelines is the lower hip, the crotch line, thigh line, lower hip, upper hip, and waistline up here, along with my 45-degree box. Okay, so, and the lengthwise grain line, any notches, markings like for your pockets, anything that was on the original pattern, go ahead and do it. Anything additional like the guidelines in the box, go ahead and add that to your working copy. All right, so this is my working pattern, and as you can see, I basically have all the markings already on there. But don't fret, we're gonna go over each one of them in detail, so you can see and separate it out, so you can see what we actually did. Okay, so as you can see, everything was marked in, including the pocket. I'm not sure if I told that in the first part. So make sure to, once you add the side yoke and pocket, you want to outline the entire pocket itself, including where the opening, where your hand will go in, the opening. And at that opening, you want to go out 5/8 of an inch, and you want to make sure to make your little seam allowance there. Okay, after you made all your markings and everything like that, now what we're going to do is come over to this center front line here. Now remember, we did the 45-degree box, right? Now also, if you remember, with the dart intakes for the center front, the maximum is a 1/2 inch, minimum is 1/4 of an inch from the straight center front, right? So I went in from the straight line 1/4 of an inch, made the mark there, use the pencil as a pointer, made the mark there, and then from that mark I went toward the original side seam, remarked 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that is this dotted line here. Okay, so what we're going to do is basically cut off that little bit. Okay, so that's the first part. So that's part number 1 that you will be making. All right, now we're going to work on the crotch line and thigh line. Okay, now if you recall from previous videos, my crotch line, thigh line total measurement was 15 1/4. I added a little bit to my measurement, so it's around 15 1/4 to 15 3/4. So as long as it's between there, I'm fine. So how did we get that? So let's go over how we get that measurement. And this is a new formula, okay? And so we're going to zoom in on that so you can see it. So it is the lengthwise, lower hip measurement average. So the average is this, is if you're taking your regular lower hip measurement around the fullest part of your bum, and if you have a tummy, you're taking, remember you're putting something flat against your tummy and retaking that measurement around your, the fullest part of your bum. And so you should have two measurements there. Mine was 50 for with the belly and 48 without the belly, just your regular lower hip measurement. So the average of that is 49. Okay, so let me darken that so you can see. So the average is 49 plus the front intended ease. Now for here, the thigh measurement, the front intended ease, the ease there is for like a slim trouser. For the thigh is typically 3/4 to 1 inch. Okay, here I used 1 inch, and if you remember, for the ease we separated it. Front gets 1/3 of it, in the back gets 2/3. So 1/3 basically of that 1 inch is about, is just less than a 1/2 inch. So I just moved it up to a 1/2 inch. Okay, so plus a 1/2 inch equals 49 plus a 1/2 inch. Okay, and then we're going to divide that by 4, which gives me 12 3/8, and then we're going to minus it by 1/4 equals 12 1/8. So from the beginning of the box, remember we're not including the saddle here, so the beginning of this box here, right here, and you're going to calculate this going back toward the side seam. So remember, typically you had this side seam open, you didn't shape it yet. Okay, so you copied everything except for the side seam, or you could have did the side seam if you liked, but just know that you were either going to extend it or come in. So this measurement, my thigh measurement, basically is 12 1/8 from the beginning of the saddle. So you take that, 12 1/8 is this mark here, and then you go out and measure for your seam allowance, and that's about there. Okay, so that's that measurement. Okay, the second measurement, all right, so for the saddle, it is the lower hip line, not the average, just the lower hip line plus belly. Okay, 2 inches difference, or just straight up put 50, because that's what that measurement was. Divided by 4 equals whatever that is, minus 1/4 plus a 1/2 inch. And that will give you the saddle. All right, so my lower hip plus belly was 50, right? Divide that by 4. All right, so my lower hip plus belly is 50. Divide that by 4. That equals 12 1/2. All right, we're going to minus out 1/4 plus 1/2. That gives 12 3/4. Then we're going to divide that by 4. That gives 3.19, which is the equivalent of 3 1/8. You go up to 3 1/4 if you like, but it's closer to 3 1/8, so I made mine 3 1/8. All right, so this one you're taking the measurement from the start of the box going toward the inseam. Okay, so it's here, it's 3 1/8 is here, going out toward the side seam. You do your seam allowance. That's what I'm doing. I'm folding this up because we haven't gotten to that portion yet, and I don't want to confuse you too much because there's a lot of markings on here. So I'm just going to kind of fold that cut line so I don't confuse you too much. right, so now we're working with the lower hip line, okay? And we basically do the same thing, okay? So the formula, excuse me, is a little bit different because we're taking the average. But we're using 47% because it is the front. Remember, 47% is the front and 53% is typically for the back unless you have a pooch. And at the waistline, that may change a little bit. But typically it's 47 for the front, 53% for the back. So we're using 47% of the lower hip line average plus the front intended ease, divided that by 2. All right, so let's work that out. So we're going to take 47% of our lower hip line average, which for me, remember, is 49. Is the 50 plus 48 divided by 2 gives you 49, plus the front intended ease. Now remember, the ease at the lower hip line for me was 2.5 inches. 1/3 of that is 7/8 of an inch. So that's for the front. Remember, 1/3 is for the front. Okay, so that amount is 49 7/8. 47% of 49 7/8 is 23.44. We're going to divide that by 2, and that equals 11.72, or the equivalent of 11 5/8 to 11 3/4, because it's kind of right in the middle, right? And so I would typically go up 11 3/4, and I think that, yeah, I did do that. So starting again at the center front line, you're going to mark out till you get to 11 3/4, which is here, and then go out 5/8 of an inch, which is here. Okay, now you can see I have some extra room here, and that's just a shaping when I added the side seam. It just gave me that extra shaping, that extra space. So either I can use that, or when I do the final fitting, I would, as I'm marking, I will mark that out, but we'll see. All right, so that's that one. Stop this here. Start over. Let's see where we're at the upper hip line. All right, so at the upper hip line, we're using 47% of the intended ease, right? And so the intended ease, we're using the same ease that we used for the lower hip line, which is 2.5 total. For the front, it will be 7/8, which is 1/3, approximately 1/3 of that ease amount. All right, so 47% of the lower hip line plus belly, which is 50, plus the front intended ease, 7/8, right? So 50 7/8. So 47% of that 50 7/8 gives you 23.91. Then we're going to divide that by 2, which gives us 11 9/6. All right, which is basically the equivalent of 12 inches. Okay, so again, moving from here, the angled center front line now, not the straight, but the angled one. Center front line, measure out 12. And when you measure 12, then you're going to measure out the 5/8, right? And that'll be your seam allowance. Now for the lower waistline, and you have to remember, this is the lower waistline. This is not the top of your waist, it's the lower. So let's say if your waistband is supposed to be 42 inches, let's just use 42. Know your lower waistline has got to be more than that 42. Okay, Don't mistake that this is your waistband amount. It is not. All right, so let's figure out what to put here, right? So you can use either 47 like we did for the front, because that is the front, if you have less than 2 inches of a difference between your lower hip line belly and regular lower hip line. If it's more than 2 inches, use 53. Okay, so I'm using 53 because mine is at least 2. And then you're going to take your top waistline, or I should just say waistband, plus the finished measurement ease plus standard ease of 1 3/4 to 2 inches. Whatever that is, you're going to divide that by 2 to get your amount here. All right, so here it is 53. I'm going to take 53% of, now the top waistband, we'll keep it at waistline, because it's true, it's a waistline. It's 42 inches plus the finished measurement ease. Now here we're going to just use everything. We're not going to separate it to the 1/3, 2/3. We're just going to evenly distribute between the waist, okay? So the finished measurement ease is 1 inch for the waist plus 1 3/4 to 2 inches. Just going to use the most. You know, you can always, in your final fitting, ease that down. So that total is 45, right? So 53% of 45 is 23.85. We're going to divide that by 2, and that gives me 11.93, which is the equivalent of 11 7/8 inch up until 12 inches, kind of like in the middle. So I probably would just go with the 12. Just like you know, like I said before, you can always adjust it in your fitting. So again, you marking from your new center front line, the slanted line, out toward your side seam, 12 inches. Remember, I always start at the 1 because this is usually not a full inch, and I will measure out to 13 because it's 13 minus 1 will give me that 12, right? So you just follow your guidelines that you marked your seam allowance here. I'll get to 13 there, make a mark, then go out 5/8. And the saddle part. Now for the angle, that 45-degree angle, remember we like it between 1 and 1.5 inches, right? So you can start at 1, start at 1 1.25 up to 1.5 inches. Mine is 1 inch here. Okay. Now we made all the adjustments to basically our guidelines, right? Now we have to figure out if we need to add to the pattern to lengthen it or shorten it. So that's the crotch depth measurement, right? Now I do have a formula to get to your crotch depth. So the measurement is, you're going to take the average of your lower hip with belly, lower hip without belly. So my average is 49, right? So 49, and then you're going to divide that by 3.5. So whatever your difference is, divide that by 3.5, gives me 14. So that is my crotch depth. So that's the formula for your crotch depth. Okay. Now you have to remember that your crotch depth, your bottom pattern doesn't include your waistband, right? So So here, from just using the pattern itself, measuring along the side seam, your stitch line, down to your cross line, thigh line, measure whatever that amount is. Mine was 11 1/4. Okay. Then add in your waistband. The waistband is 1 3/4. That gives me 13. I need 14. So I'm short 1 inch. All right. Now remember, you should have a lengthen and shorten line on your pattern piece. And what you're going to do is just cut along that line. Add if you need to add. Subtract if you need to subtract. I needed to add, so I added that 1 inch. I can take this off without cutting, without tearing. Alrighty, and so I added that 1 inch, and that's what you see here. So now if I remeasure here to here, and then add in the 1 3/4, I would get 14. So that'll fit my body. Okay. So because I added this, the same length on the side seam, the same length at the center front, that increased my center front line, right? I need this to be a certain amount. Okay. I need this to be 12 1/2 for me. How did I come up with that measurement? Right? All right. So crotch length. How do we figure that one out? Or how do we tell how much goes in the front, how much goes in the back? Right? All right. So your total minus 30. And remember, you take it, or I take it, from the top of your belly button, between your legs, up until your waist at the back, your natural waist. So you have to put like an elastic around your waist so you know where that waist ends at the back. Okay, so taking that measurement, mine was 30. So what you first want to do is, so how do we tell which the front and how much to give to the back, right? So the front, we're going to use at that Femeria 47%. All right, so I should put it over here. 47% of 30 is 14, or basically 14. All right, from here, we're going to take out, it's just a standard what we take out. There's no reason for it, no rhyme for it, it's just what we take out. 1 1/2 inches. All right, that gives me 12 1/2. Okay, now the back, all right, the back, we're going to be using 53%. So your starting point here is 16 inches. So 53% of 30 will give you 16. Okay, now everybody gets, whether you are petite or whatever, to mature size, everybody gets starting off 1 1/4 inches. Okay, and then you're going to get either 1 inch, so it's 1 inch for, we'll say, full hips, or 2 inches for fuller hips is how I can say it. And you can also use, if it's under 2 inches, that difference between your lower hip line and belly, just use 1. If it's over 2 or equal to 2, use the 2 inches. Okay, I'm going to use the 2. So for me, it is plus 145 plus 2 inches. Okay, that gives me a total of 19 and a quarter for my back. So I added the 16, I added the 125, and I added the 2 to give me that 19 and a quarter. So my front needs to be 12 and a half, back needs to be 19 and a quarter. Now, as you can see, that included ease, because that is now over 30. So first, you need to measure from the top all the way to your crotch. Line. Figure out what that measurement is, add in your waistband, which is 1 3/4. Okay, so this is mine. So I needed mine to be 12 and a half, right? This whole crotch length. I'm going to minus out 1 3/4 because that's the waistband. So I need this measurement of just my pants. Just my pants needs to be 10 3/4 to make that work. When I measured it, it was actually 12. So I'm over 1 1/4 inches. So I need to reduce this by 1 1/4 inches. I need to reduce the crotch line by 1 1/4 inches. Now remember, when we are reducing and using the angle, basically it's a dart. When we reduce it, if you increase it, it makes fullness. If you decrease it, it takes away that fullness, right? So you do not want to have that opening or overlapping in a place where you don't want that fabric to shrink. So for me, I don't want that shrinkage or taking away fabric underneath my belly, because that'll accentuate my, my belly. So you always make that opening or overlapping closing at what I call lady lumps, right? So the lady lumps here is the belly, which is the upper hip line. So that's where I'm going to overlap, and my difference is 1 1/4 inches. And my hinge point will be whatever the line is right underneath it. For me, it's the lower hip line. Now remember, anything basically over the inch, anything over 1 inch, you should really do more than 1 hinge, but it's just 1 1/4 inches, so I'm going to make that work. So this is my hinge. I'm going to, and I already made the line all the way up to the upper hip line. So I'm going to cut to here, stop, cut from there all the way up, and I reinforce the hinge point with some tape, meaning I just put some pieces of tape there. So I'll cut that, and I'll show you what that looks like coming back. All right, so I done made that cut on that diagonal line. I had previously made the mark of where my 1 1/4 is, so I'm just going to overlap it so I get there. All right. And use some tape to secure. All right, so remember, this is our waist, right, of where we need it to be. So we need to kind of reconnect that here to down here. You want to get it connected as fast as possible. So either the upper hip line or close to the upper hip line, as fast as you can get it. Where it's not that, we don't want to call it, so it's not that dramatic. You know, you don't want to do it right here, because that'll be right here, where that'll be very dramatic. So it seems to be, I could probably do it, yeah. upper hip line. I mean the lower hip line. About right there. And remember, you should be using a pencil. Now, mind you, since I did that, the 5/8 is a little bit outside, so you can add a little paper here if you want, or just when you're cutting, just know, just to, you know, give it a little leeway there. And I'll probably just give it a little leeway, so I don't have to waste paper. So here, going back to our pocket now. All right, so now you want to trace off your pocket. Your yoke and pocket. I previously did a little bit of this. I can probably, let me see. Well, I don't have to. I'm trying to do so I don't have to add to this to the side. It's going to shorten my pocket, as you can see here, but I don't care about that. And my daughter took all my weights, but basically what I'm doing, I'm just tracing so I can encompass. And then going on here, and this will be the old line. All up here, that'll be the old line. Now you can just add paper to the other side, the side seam side, but I'm just shortening my pocket just a tad to avoid that. So this is my pocket right here, the opening. And then we'll come up and remeasure that. So about where those markings are. It's a marking there. There's a marking right here. Surface around it. So draw that. All right. So now what we're going to do is this would be the 5/8 seam allowance for the pocket bag. Okay, that's what was not needed, right? And cut that off. And down bottom. That was not needed because we made our pocket bag a tad bit shorter. Alrighty, so that is the seam allowance. That is the pocket opening. Those are the new markings. Okay, and so that's the yoke, meaning the side seam, and the pocket bag. Okay, and so now we just need the pocket bag with that side seam. If I can find it, it was here somewhere. There we go. It's hard to put it on front. Make it easier for me to see. Alright, so opening. Markings, and we can just re-drill. You see some done at the bottom. I just did that. Those markings right here. I just lined it up on top like that. Re-drew in the pocket opening. Re-drew in the markings. And now I'm going to these markings, the side seam. Because we shortened the pocket. Look at that little piece right there. And so that fits on this perfectly. Okay. And that's how your pocket and pocket bag will be. Alrighty, I must say. Now, when you are ready to cut out your fabric, obviously you don't need this part because you have that part, right? So you cut it away. You cut it, I'm sorry, at the side seam, at the seam allowance here. You cut that away, okay? Or you can just clip into it and fold it back. So it'll look like that. You know, you clip it if you want to keep it attached. All right. And I want to say that is it for the front. You can remeasure this. And keep in mind, this is no longer. Now, and also our straighter grain went off because we, you know, folded it in, so that screwed that one, you know, up a little bit. So if you want, you can redraw it, and you just use the bottom part as reference. Okay. So that part goes away. That is now your lengthwise grain. And I want to say that is completely it for the front. Now again, I don't think I told you. Then you use your master pattern, right, to redraw the side seam. So you line up as many as you can, okay? And if you have to move up, you know, once you finish one section, move up, and redraw your outline there. Or you can take a hip ruler, which looks like this, and try to line up as many as the seam allowances that you can. And if I do it that way, honestly, I can take off some of this, and I probably will. All right, because it was a little over anyway, right? You can't see none of that, what I just did. I'm trying to move my big hands out the way. What I did is just lined up the hip ruler, and I just shaved off a little bit right here, which was fine because I actually, remember I was telling you at the final I was gonna probably shave it off anyway. Did it for me. So either one, or you can do both. So that is your front pattern, and basically the back pattern is just the same. You're just using a little bit different formula, since like instead of 47%, you're going to use 53% in some of the spaces, and instead of the 1/3 for the ease distribution, instead of that being 1/3 for the front, you're using 2/3 for the back. But we'll go through all of that. So set your front pattern aside, and remember, you can remeasure that to make sure that that is whatever your measurement should be. Mine would be 10 3/4, because then I'll add on the 1 3/4, which will give me 12 1/2. And then you'll be finished with the front. Now, let's say it wasn't, and you need to increase it. You know, maybe you did too much there. The max I would say to increase at the inseam here is 1/2 inch. The rest should go at the top of the pattern. Or you can split it between the two also, but never more than 1/2 inch at your inseam, okay? Because that just makes it more bulky, more fabric in between your legs, and excess fabric, and you just don't want that. All right, that's it for the front.